Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the Enlightened Humanity Circle Spiritual Rave. My name is Lily Winsaft, and I am here with Bonnie Sachs.
Hi there. How are you?
We together created the Eighth Chakra Company, and we are all about mastering what it is to be human through accessing our own information. And we're excited to have David Young here today with us. He is a twice Grammy-nominated singer, musician, artist, and we are so excited that you are here with us today, David. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Besides being a singer, I am a flute player too.
So David, you know, our audience is going to be able to get on your website and take a look at your bio and take a look at all the things that you've done. And we know that you have recorded almost 60 CDs and that you have come into your artist. You've been an artist in the past, and then recently you really came into your artistic work. Can you please tell us a little bit about what's the back behind the stage story? What is the inside scoop on how you got to where you are today as an artist and playing two flutes?
How did I get there? Well, I played one as a normal person, right? That's what most people do. I played one recorder. It's a Renaissance flute. And, you know, I did that for, I don't know, about 25 years. I started playing at Venice Beach after playing rock music for many years. And I started a group called Celestial Winds, and I sold about 100,000 CDs with my partner who played the harp. And then I started doing my own CDs without being under the name Celestial Winds. And now I've recorded 60 albums. And, you know, I did art festivals from 1993 till about 2009. And, you know, I got on a plane every weekend and flew to a city and played at an art festival, whether it was in New York or Chicago or Miami or wherever it was all over the country. I sold 1 million CDs doing that. And I also played at different spa conventions for massage therapy and Reiki. And so basically between 1997 and 2007, you could get a massage at any spa in North America, and it literally was a 50% chance it was my music they were playing all day long. Because I was the only musician who thought of playing music, you know, relaxation music, at the spa conventions, you know, and it was amazing. That was before the digital age, and you know, I literally could sell 1,000 CDs in a weekend.
Wow.
You know, and you know, then about 3 years ago, I started to sing again because, you know, I used to sing a lot before I got known as the guy who plays two flutes at one time and wears the puffy shirt, just like the Seinfeld episode. That episode was inspired, the writers were inspired by seeing me play the flute down at Venice Beach wearing a white puffy shirt. That's where they got the idea. So, you know, you got to be famous for something. So I was, you know, famous for a shirt and we're playing two flutes at one time. You know, and
so, but let me just interrupt you for 1 second because I'm really interested to know, how did you make that? Where does the two flutes come from? And the music that you played there, how did that come about?
Well, it's funny you should ask me that because I've only been asked that about 100,000 times. So. Well, what happened was I was playing with a woman who played the harp, and in the beginning we basically knew 6 songs together. And so we'd play those same 6 songs over and over 30, 40 times a day, which for a musician is called torture, okay? And during the afternoons after we'd played them 25 times, you know, I actually felt like I was going crazy because, you know, to have to repeat myself, can you imagine saying 6 poems over and over 30 or 40 times a day? You know, let me out, please, you know? And so she used to wear these long white flowing dresses. She had long, beautiful hair, and she had a Celtic harp. And, you know, she was a beautiful sight for people to see on Venice Beach as you were walking by. And anytime somebody walked by, it would be like, wow, look at that beautiful woman, that beautiful harp. And I was like the invisible man. Now, I had been the singer and the leader of most of the bands that I was in, so I was used to being in the spotlight and being the center of attention. And I went from being the center of attention to getting no attention. Okay.
Mm.
And because I was a middle child, that was not working for me at all. So every once in a while during the afternoons, I would pick up a second flute and try to play two at one time. And every time I did that, whoever was walking by would say, hey, look, there's a guy playing two flutes at one time. And then she was invisible. And honestly, that's the only reason why I did it, was because it's the only way I could like even the score of getting attention, you know. And it was a beautiful sound. It was an unforgettable visual to see a guy playing two flutes at one time, you know, because that's not normal. And so that became my trademark: two flutes and a puffy shirt, you know.
Wow. That I love that story. That's amazing. And what I find interesting about that is that story talks, it alludes to a little bit of that ego coming in, right? Going to from, oh, I had a lot of attention to no attention. How can I get more attention? But really, your music is so non-ego. Could you say a little bit about that and maybe your journey in that?
Well, before I say that, I want to say, you know, maybe that's one of the differences between a man and a woman, because when a woman doesn't feel like she's getting any attention, she changes her hairstyle. You know what I mean? I didn't really think about changing my hairstyle. I don't know. I just couldn't resist sharing that because it was for no reason. Now, can you ask me that question again, please?
Sure. That your story about the woman in the dress and the harp, and you looking at saying, wow, I was getting all this attention and now I'm not getting any attention. What can I do to get attention? That's such an ego-based conversation. But your music
Absolutely.
is so not about ego. So can you say a little bit about your journey? Because I'm sure you confronted your ego during that time.
Well, whatever was left of my ego at that time, because what happened was, you know, I was a classically trained musician. I played in rock bands for years with many people who got to be famous, you know, and a rock musician is an ego personified, you know what I mean? It's like, that is the whole thing. And so what happened was that I ran out of money when I got to LA about 6 months after I got there, and I was literally down to my last $100. And I was 30 years old. My parents wouldn't bail me out anymore, and I was in serious trouble. And so I went down to Venice Beach to play by myself, and I didn't make $1. And I was walking back towards my car where I had paid $6 to park my car. Now I have $94 left, you know? That was 6% of my net worth, you know? And I came across this woman who saw me singing and playing guitar at one of the clubs. And she asked me how I did, because we had a mutual friend. And I said, I didn't even make $1. She says, well, why don't you play with me for a little bit? And maybe you can at least make your parking back. So, you know, I sat down on the concrete on the boardwalk, which was very symbolic because I couldn't go any lower. I was on the concrete. She didn't have a chair for me. You know, so when you asked me about my ego, there was no ego at that point. In that moment, I had no ego because, oh my gosh, I am sitting on the ground. I can't go any lower. I mean, what could be worse? You know what I mean? And when I opened my eyes up at the end of the song, there was a whole crowd of people around us, about 30 people, who were throwing money in this basket that was in front of us. And from where I was sitting on the ground, it looked like it was raining money.
Wow.
And so the thing was that the following week we made a tape with my last $100. And that tape was called Celestial Winds. And every week we'd make 50 of them, or 70 of them, or 90 of them, or 100 of them, or 150 of them. So whatever we would sell through, we'd order a little teeny bit more the next week. And I have to tell you that I did that thing at Venice Beach for 2.5 years, every weekend, never for 1 second thinking that that was going to be my career, because I thought it was difficult enough to make it as a singer or as a guitar player, as a songwriter. And I never, can you imagine doing something on the weekend for 2.5 years, making enough money to get by, because I was making enough money to pay my rent in LA and to eat and have some money for gas. This was between 1990 and 1992. And then it hit. It hit. I mean, when I say it hit, like basically overnight, we just started making twice as much money, really for no reason at all. it was pretty miraculous thing, to tell you the truth, because I was giving up on that whole thing. And I was planning on moving from Los Angeles to Nashville in a couple of weeks. And the way the universe set this thing up, because I'm telling you, I wouldn't have been playing the flute in Nashville, that's for sure, you know. And the way this was all set up, and it just finally caught on. Literally in the last week, I was going to be playing with my partner at Universal City Walk, because we got hired at City Walk after playing at Venice Beach. And that's where, you know, we played the last 6 months, because that's just the way the whole thing worked out.
Wow.
So I had no ego, because here I was, you know, playing music on the street, and, you know, from being a rock musician, being the guy in the middle with all the lights on you, and kind of being very popular, because I was popular for a couple of years doing that, you know, to go from there to Venice Beach. I'm telling you, when you're in a position where you're doing that, it's like there is no ego, because people are looking down on you. Like, you see, in America, there's really not that much difference between a street musician and a bum. Okay?
Well,
but what happened was that we had some friends who were like magicians and comedians and stuff, guys who rode unicycles and twirled fire and all this kind of stuff. In Canada, a street musician is a celebrity. So they told us about these big street performer festivals that had hundreds of thousands of people that came to them. And so they connected us with that, and we went up there. Well, the first one we did was in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which was a gigantic street performer festival. And we played at this thing for 10 days. And we sold like over 3,000 CDs and tapes in 10 days. And when we got there at the airport, the press was there. Like we were somebody special. So we went from being looked at like a bum to being met at the airport by the press, doing an interview when we got off the plane. You know what I mean? What is the life like to be a busker? A busker is another word for street performer. And we just couldn't believe that we were we weren't being looked down on the way we had been looked down on at Venice Beach for 2 years. But, you know, the thing is that during that 2 years, we had sold 10,000 tapes, cassette tapes back in the day.
Well, that's a really great segue to move into. At some point in your musician career, you started channeling other realms, the angelic realm, ascended masters, and at some point you made a transition from being a conduit for people to be able to really access an inner wisdom and other dimensions that are speaking to us all the time. And one of the things you've said to me is that you really believe that we are being led and guided and spoken to by a higher dimension, and that we all need to really start listening to that and step into that wisdom. So can you say a little bit about what does accessing your own information mean to you, and how do you do that through your music with people, and how can you teach people to do that?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that I came from a very logical, practical background, you know. And even though I started meditating when I was 22, and I didn't believe in channeling. You know, I never had a channeling experience where, you know, I didn't believe people could actually communicate with somebody in the other dimension, in the heavenly dimension. I mean, if you tried to have a conversation with me about that, let's say 10 years ago, I would not have had a conversation with you, because I didn't believe in that. You know, and at that point, I thought that being skeptical showed people that I was intelligent. That's what most people who come from the logical, you know, scientific background kind of thing think. They think that way, you know. But really, because I had never had any of those experiences, I didn't think they were possible. And I didn't believe anybody who ever shared anything like that. But 10 years ago, that was not the kind of thing that people shared openly anyway. Like, if you think about it, if you have a group of 30 people at a spiritual event and you ask them, how many people know what Reiki is? Well, most of those people would raise their hands. But if you say, okay, now How many of you knew what Reiki was 25 years ago? Maybe 2 or 3 people raised their hands. Because in the last 20, 30 years, all the things that used to sound weird and crazy 20, 30, 40 years ago, those are all things that are completely normal now. We accept these things. And so reality actually changes. When we think about reality, we think that that's a constant thing. But reality is constantly changing, because 30 years ago, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all these things. So you couldn't even imagine 30 years ago what is a normal part of our day right now. And likewise, that's where this whole thing is going, because the ascended masters and archangels, who really all work together. You know, a lot of times people in this physical realm, they think about, oh, well, I'm either going to go to this church or that temple or that synagogue. I go to one of them, and these are all separate. But that's just part of this physical dimension, because in the heavenly dimension, there is no separation. And Jesus and Buddha and Krishna and Moses and all of them, they are all friends. They all appreciate one another. They all work together to give people experiences so they can know that they exist. Now, one of the big differences between now, being 2017, versus 1,000 years ago when it was 1017, is back then it was not accepted for people to talk openly about their spiritual experiences. Okay, where now it is totally accepted, and it's actually being encouraged by the ascended masters to share your spiritual experiences with other people who are open. If they're not open, don't waste a second of your time, really. Next, right? But if people are open, share these spiritual things that you're experiencing, because this is creating a whole new level of what we consider normal.
Mm-hmm.
And
so tell us how your music opens up these channels when people are listening to it.
Well, I have this little button on it. It's the channel opening thing. I hit this button on my flute, boom, everybody goes right up.
What do you think?
It's hard to find a good flute like that. No, what happens? What happens? First of all, last night I did my 279th event in the last 3 years. So I'm usually in 3 or 4 cities every week. And one of the things that I do is the first 20 minutes, I do my introduction where I share with people what's possible. Most people don't know what's possible. You know, most people, what they think of as normal, like what we thought of what was normal 30 years ago versus now, it's totally different. All the things that were weird and strange are now normal. So I intend on making new bumper stickers that say, weird is the new normal, because it's really true. I mean, you know it's true, right? You know, because 30 years ago, you couldn't even imagine having the conversations that you have every week with your spiritual friends, you know? So I do an introduction. I share with people what's possible. Like one woman a couple of years ago had an experience on a Friday night. Martin Luther King came to her and told her that he had work for her to do in 2 to 3 days. There were 40 people in the room. We all heard it. On Monday morning, she posts on my Facebook page that her boss called her into his office on Monday morning and put her in charge of the Martin Luther King Fund at their company. She didn't even know there was a Martin Luther King Fund at her company. This is normal. This happens every night at my events. Half of the people who come to my event while I'm playing the flute either have a conversation or spiritual travel with one of their loved ones or one of the ascended masters. But I'm going to tell you that the word ascended masters, most people associate that, you know, with Jesus or Buddha or Saint Germain or Mother Mary, or, you know what I mean? One of those guys. But the ascended masters, it's all the people who have had a positive effect on mankind. Gandhi is an ascended master. Believe it or not, Dr. Wayne Dyer is an ascended master. Mm-hmm. You know, we logically separate things, but in that heavenly dimension, they don't have separation like we have separation in this physical dimension. So these things are just, it's a normal part of my day. I mean, at this point, 3,600 people who look just like all you people out there in TV land have shared a conversation or a spiritual experience with one of their loved ones, a grandmother, a dad, a best friend from childhood who died young. 3,600 people have had that experience and talked about it with other people at my events. Do you know how empowering that is for people to be able to share that? I had this one woman, it took her 10 minutes to share her whole experience because it was so incredible. I never, you barely ever heard anybody share an experience like that in your whole life. After she was finished, the woman who was sitting right in front of her said to everybody else in the room, she said, I experienced word for word exactly every single thing you just described 2 years ago, and I've never had one person to talk about it with.
Wow.
And this is the new normal.
Yeah. Well, we truly, and Bonnie and I talk about this all the time, that we're truly moving into a much more creative era for humanity, and awakening and an opening of consciousness and in the collective, and assuming that the ascended masters and angelic realm are supporting us in accessing our own information and tapping into who we are in essence. What would you say are a few tips that you can give to people? Because obviously you're tapping into that through your art, through your music, and you're facilitating it for others. But what can people do on their own, David, that will help them to access that inner wisdom and tap into those realms? What are some nuggets that you can give to us that people can actually do today, or start today anyway?
Well, you can definitely listen to my music more. No, I'm just
absolutely.
Well, for sure, you absolutely got to meditate. You want to connect with the spiritual realm. You want to awaken the spiritual part of yourself, your soul, your higher self, your higher consciousness. You got to meditate, because your mind and your logic think mistakenly that is your intelligence. That's the 2% of your brain that every scientist on this planet agrees that that's all we use, is 2%. We think our logic is everything, but it's really only 2% of who we really are. Okay. So what happens when you meditate, and I'll tell you, it cracks me up, because, I have people come to my events or come to get a private reading from me, and I ask them if they meditate, and they said, yeah, I tried it for 3 minutes and it didn't work. I mean, that's pretty funny, you know what I mean? Because it takes 10, 15 minutes for your mind to stop the running around that it's normally doing all the time. And it takes 10 or 15 minutes of silence to at least get in a place where there's a little opening in there between your thoughts that you can actually receive a message. So you can, have some spiritual opening in your heart, in your mind, and in your soul, So meditating is absolutely the most important thing. Now, it's important for people to know that there's different ways of experiencing the divine, spirit, God, universal energy, whatever you call it. Because some people are visual and have visions, right? Other people are more auditory, so they'll get messages in words from the divine. And other people experience it as a feeling, Now, one of the problems that we have is that if we're focused on having a visual experience, but it's natural for us to experience it in feeling or through an auditory message, we're thinking, well, what am I doing wrong? Well, just when you're meditating, see what comes to you, and whatever's coming to you, literally after 10, 15 minutes, because you can't judge your meditation until you're in it for 15 minutes. It's like somebody saying, well, gee, I'm working out and nothing's happening. Well, how long are you working out? Well, I'm only working out for 2 minutes. Holy cow, you don't even break a sweat in 2 minutes, right? And the good part, is when we're breaking a sweat. So spiritually, we need to create some space in our mind, in our heart, in our being, to have a spiritual experience. And it's going to take you got to warm up to it, right? You wouldn't run a marathon as your first workout. You build yourself up to that, and you warm up, just like any kind of physical exercise. In a spiritual exercise, takes the same thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So well put. What can people do, David, to step into their creative self?
Well, first of all, one of the things that I ask people at my events, which is a way of, anytime you take a word that, like when we think of the word your imagination, many people associate that word imagination with being 5 or 10 years old, and in a non-respectful way. Oh yeah, my imagination, that's something that I did when I was a kid, But when you use the word creativity, your creativity, all of a sudden that's a good feeling. That's a positive. You're thinking about using your creativity. But if you think about it, your creativity is the exact same thing as your imagination, because when you're being creative, you're imagining what would it take to solve this problem, or what would it, you go into your imaginative, creative part of your brain. So your creativity is the same thing as your imagination. It's important for people to make that connection, because all of a sudden that will make them friends with that word imagination. You know what I mean? Because adults, creativity is a much more friendly, accepted word to an adult. But here's the point. In the physical dimension, our thoughts and our imagination can be different than what our physical reality is. But in the heavenly dimension, your thoughts and your imagination are the same thing as reality. This is why all the millions of people who have had lucid dreaming experiences, where they wake up in the dream as their soul, they know that they're in that other dimension, but their physical body they can even sometimes see their physical bodies, like looking down on it, like they're watching a movie, and they see their body sleeping. Okay. One of the things that all the people who've had lucid dreaming experiences, as well as near-death experiences, have shared is that whatever they thought about while they were in the heavenly dimension, it manifested instantly. That's one of the differences between the heavenly reality and the physical reality. Because in the heavenly reality, your imagination is reality. Because whatever you're using your creativity for, whether it's thinking about something or visualizing something, it manifests instantly.
Yes, very amazing. Absolutely. So besides people, of course, listening to your music and meditating, is there one last tip that you can give to people? You recently had a major stepping into painting. And is there something that you can recommend that people can do to take that step and have the courage to move into that place? Because I think a lot of people are being inspired, but they're not taking the action. Is there something that people can do in that place of action for themselves?
Well, this is going to sound funny, but coffee. Honestly, coffee gives you that little bit of energy burst, and gives you that, I don't know if you call it the gumption, or when you have some coffee, it's like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of how I could say this in a way that would be appropriate in an interview like this. But coffee gives you.
Well, I can certainly relate to that. I'm a total coffee person, so that gets me in action every day. And
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
My writing, and yeah, absolutely. Okay.
You get up in the morning, things are moving slow, and it's like, oh, you got to get woken up, right? You have some coffee, it's like, okay, I'm ready to start my day, And honestly, I've had some of the best spiritual experiences of my entire life after I drank a big cup of coffee, because the coffee doesn't let me go to sleep when I start to meditate. You know what I mean? And so I'm it allows me to, because sometimes people fall asleep when they're meditating, and the coffee keeps me from falling asleep, and also gives my mind that little, hey, let's go do something. You know what I mean? We got some energy. Let's do something. I'm sure, like hundreds and thousands of years ago, that coffee was used as a thing to really, really get you moving, and you know what I'm saying. And believe me, I didn't have a cup of coffee my whole life until I think it was about 6 years ago. I never drank coffee. I didn't eat chocolate. I didn't drink beer or alcohol or anything, But I think that there's some good things about having a cup of coffee to get yourself moving and
get in action.
Put some action out, get it going.
Well, David, I have to say that I absolutely adore you. And as you were talking about the group that you had, Celestial Winds, I suddenly remembered my husband and I actually owned a music store. We closed it in 2007, but we have listened to your albums over and over again. It's one of my husband's favorite pieces of music to put on when he's working. So I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to be so excited when he hears that we have talked to you. And unfortunately, go ahead.
Well, I always thought your husband had good taste in music.
He obviously does. So unfortunately, though, our time is up. I mean, this has been an incredible conversation. I'm just so excited about this, talking with you, David Young, and we really appreciate your sharing your wisdom and your information, and how you actually have been accessing ascended masters. You really make it sound so easy and accessible. And I want to encourage everyone to go to your website and read more, to go to YouTube and watch the videos. Your paintings are absolutely beautiful, so I want to encourage everyone to take a look at those. Make sure you get some more information and listen to your music, because it's absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And for everyone else, I hope you are enjoying the Enlightened Humanity Circle Spiritual Rave. We are so pleased to be able to bring you these fabulous speakers and this great information, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.